Okay, so good morning. I'd like to thank the Gifted and Talented program, and especially Jamin, for inviting me to be here today. For those who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, like you said, my name is Devon Lobe, and I'm an 8th grade language arts teacher at the Voorhees Middle School. And, most importantly, I really enjoy seeing my former students, and I see you guys in a crowd, and it's so weird seeing you guys grow up and be successful, but, it's such a pleasure. So today I'm here to talk to you about becoming a writer, So first let me start off and tell you that the majority of my writing is rejected, 90% of it. I'll receive an email from whichever literary journal I submitted to, and it'll say something like, "While we enjoyed reading your work, it just isn't right for us." And so in frustration, I'll ask myself, what is right for your journal? Sometimes the answer is clear. If the journal publishes poetry about cats and my poem is about dogs, I'm obviously not going to be accepted. So that means I just have to do my homework. I have to see what the literary journal publishes. But sometimes the answer is not clear. Sometimes I may still be rejected without a hint of why. I may get no feedback or criticism or suggestions. I know from grading your papers, I typically will write in cursive, so you don't understand what I'm saying. But nonetheless, you guys know how important suggestions and feedback can be. And when submitting your work to literary journals, you typically don't get any. So I wanted to read you an example of one of my latest rejection letters. And so this is what it said. "We received over 600 submissions, and as you might imagine, it's difficult to decide which pieces to choose. With that in mind, I'm very sorry to be writing with you to the news that your essay was not among the ones chosen to be published." So, in that rejection letter, when you're like, "Oh man, I spent so many hours writing that piece," they just tell me no. And I'm like, why? What did I do wrong? Did I not spell a word right? What is wrong with my piece? But, if you guys could try to kind of go back and think about it, they had to read 600 submissions. And that's kind of where it starts. And so, as you can imagine, I still have no idea why my piece wasn't published or why it was rejected. But more importantly, editors read hundreds, if not more, submissions per reading period. I might read 130 essays, but I got weeks to get through them. When you're submitting to a literary journal, there's so many other writers submitting to it. And so, it's like a tryout. When you're trying out for the wrestling team, or you're trying out for the debate team, or whatever you're trying out for, you're competing against other people. So I was competing against 600 other people. So this journal was called Creative Nonfiction. And the more successful a literary journal is, the more difficult it is to get accepted into it. If you're trying to get onto a very successful soccer team, it's going to be that much harder to get into it. So the problem is that this creative journal has been publishing for 20 years, and it is the first and largest literary journal to exclusively publish creative nonfiction. But really, I'm not surprised I was rejected. I was swinging for one of the best magazines. And more importantly, amongst the 600 other writers, they all have been published. And the majority of them has been published more than I have. And they also have MFA degrees, which I have, but they have books. And so I do not. I do not have a book, not yet. I'm trying, but it hasn't happened yet. Nonetheless, what I want you guys to know is that publishing is extremely subjective. People are biased by nature. When judging creativity, it's incredibly difficult to definitively say, this is good and this is bad. I don't know if some of you remember, but we did a poetry unit in 8th grade, and the majority of you got hundreds on your poems. And it wasn't because they were good or bad, it was because I tried to judge effort. But when you're submitting your work to literary magazines, you get the impression that what you're writing is good or bad. But it's hard to definitively say that. What I want you guys to think about is that it's important not to take rejections personally. And the rejections that I receive are ones from literary journals. You all receive rejections in different ways. So one editor may pass on my work without a second glance, and then another may accept it and love it. And I guess, that's kind of what happens in life in general. Here's an example of one of my favorite acceptance letters. It said, "We want to publish the story. The issue comes out tomorrow. For what it's worth, we received over 300 submissions this month, and I enjoyed your story very most of all." And that story was published by Harpoon Review, and that was the story that was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. Besides publishing my work, I serve as the assistant poetry editor at Connotation Press and Online Artifact. My responsibilities as an editor are reading submissions, accepting and declining poems, and writing reviews on the poets I've accepted. It's definitely weird being on the opposite side of things, having the powers to reject submissions. It's like now I'm vindicated for all the wrong editors have done to me. But it's not like that. I do it because I want to support literary journals. I want to support other writers. And I want to keep I want to keep a pulse on the competition. The publishing world is actually very, very small. There's an influx of writers, but not an influx of published writers, who I might accept is most likely published elsewhere, and sometimes published in the same journals as me. This can be a coincidence, but not always. When accepting poets, I look for narrative poetry. I look for poems that are prosaic and tell stories. I look for poems like mine. So in a way, I'm just as subjective as the editors who reject me. It's full circle. But considering the amount of time I've spent writing is to consider how many hours an athlete has spent practicing. And it's been said that it takes anywhere from 10,000 hours or 6 to 10 years to master anything. Now, I've been in school for 20 years, and I'm still nowhere near mastering the art of writing. But I know what I'm doing. I know when I've written something good. It's kind of like when a baseball player knows when to swing. This person has watched as many baseball games as I've read books, and has probably swung a bat as many times as I've written a poem. Both of us just know by experience. To me, being a writer was like when a child had a dream to become a professional athlete, or a famous musician, or a renowned brain surgeon. Whatever anyone's dream may be, being a writer was mine. But in high school, like many other students, I didn't really know what I wanted to study in college, let alone what I wanted out of life. But I wrote poems because I liked rap music. And I sometimes wanted to impress girls with odes and pretty language. But my poetry was terrible. Literally, it was really, really bad. Like I have a book of poems that I wrapped in duct tape, and then I locked it in a box that I locked in another box, and then locked it in a cabinet. Terrible. But nevertheless, my poetry has gotten better because I write. Poetry, in the very act of writing, it gave me power. It gave me agency. I had control of what happened on the paper. And in life, so much of it is out of our control. But when writing, it was mine. It was my story, and it gave me self-definition. And everybody has their thing, and writing was mine. But it also gave me a reason to do better in school. I wanted to become a writer and an English teacher, and to achieve my goal, doing well in my classes was necessary. It's something I was talking about to the students yesterday, that if you want to be a doctor, you may ask yourself, well, why do I need to pay attention to English class? Well, because you still need to pass English to pass school, and you still have to take English when you go to college. So whatever goal you make, you still have to do the necessary work. And so I decided that I had to do better in all my classes, and like I said, maybe that's the key to success. You set a goal, you make it immovable, and you do anything to achieve it. And writing was my goal. And whatever you want out of life, the practice and the work ethic and the perseverance is always the same. So as a teacher, that's what I want my students to learn over everything. To try your best at whatever you do. Now, to be fair, I don't expect all my students to become writers. That's naive. But I do expect students to appreciate and learn from the process of taking an idea and turning it into a plot or a thesis or stanzas or a conclusion. It's a transformation of thought into this other thing, and I really think that's extraordinary. And if you can approach everything in life with that attitude and that attention to detail, then success really will be what you make it. But I'm not here to give you guys a motivational speech. I'm here to tell you guys how to become better writers. So 1, you have to read. You should not spend a year writing a novel about two teenagers who fell in love, but they were sworn enemies. Nor should you write a novel about teenagers from different districts who have to fight to the death. You need to know the classics as much as you need to know what's current. So you have to read, and you have to read a lot. And you have to learn about your genre. BuzzFeed, the online media company, published a piece called The 27 Most Exciting Books Coming in 2016. So I will start there. You have to consider that those authors listed are obviously doing something right. 2, get connected. Use social media to follow your favorite authors. Use it to find hundreds of writing communities in your area. Go to public poetry readings, go to weekend workshops. Be around people who are doing what you're doing. Creative minds will always inspire more creativity. And again, even if you're not going to be a writer and you're an athlete or you do some type of other activity, if you surround yourself with people who are doing the same thing and they're better at it than you, you're going to get better. And 3, what's most important is you have to write. You have to write every day, even if it's just a sentence. L. Frank Baum, the author of the hugely successful Wizard of Oz series, would wake up in the middle of the night and he would write stories on his bedroom wallpaper. Your poetic brain is like a muscle and you have to exercise it. When completing my thesis for graduate school, I woke up at 5 a.m. every morning and I wrote. But I don't expect you to be as dramatic as that. You just need to make writing a part of your everyday. So with that, I'd like to read one of my pieces to you, if that's okay. All right. So the piece I'm going to read to you is, it was published by Tahoma Literary Review. So just give me 1 second to find it. So the majority of my writing is kind of like poems, but it's also kind of like nonfiction. It's a kind of a mix in between. So the piece I'm going to read to you is called Like Gladiators. But it could have been the summer heat. We all sitting around, dehydrated, with cotton mouth and skin dried and gray and ashen. And all our bodies were hot and sticky and brined like a summer camp, bunked and almost eating off of each other's knobby knees.